on the call that don't know, I'm Lindsay. I'm with ABC, and we're really excited to partner with CTC Talent Partners this morning for the first of two webinars in the series of Strengthen Your Hiring and Workforce Strategy. So we'll have this one today, and then the second one will be on January 14. First I'll introduce Adam. He'll kind of give you an overview of who he has from his team here, and then we'll get rolling. So over to you, Adam.
Thank you, Lindsay, and thank you to ABC West Michigan for hosting this. I want to thank everyone who decided to attend today this morning so close to the holiday. Hope you're all gearing up for a wonderful holiday, safe and relaxing. Hopefully, everybody's gotten their holiday shopping done or close to it. And Obviously, as Lindsay said, I'm Adam Casola with CTC Talent Partners. We're a proud ABC West Michigan member. My colleagues Jason Epstein and Rachel Orr are joining me, and we're going to guide you through this webinar. So we look forward to that. We actually combined have 25 years of experience in construction recruiting, including the last 10 spent recruiting throughout the Midwest, including Michigan and in West Michigan. So happy to be here, and going to share my screen here so we can get into the webinar uh, and talk through that. And hopefully my screen is visible. Yes.
Yep,
Okay.
you're good.
Perfect. Great. So you can see the topic on here. Um, Really, the goal is for everyone today, it's not about us, it's about the people that attend, and we appreciate everybody being here. We want to make sure that there's an opportunity, if anybody has any questions, comments, anything they'd like to share and they feel comfortable sharing, they have permission to do so, whether it's a best practice that's working well for them inside their company, a challenge. We want to make sure we have an opportunity. The chat option is open. We'll be monitoring that as a team. So I want to make sure there will be plenty of time to answer any questions, talk through anything that's top of mind for anyone. So, and just reiterating that this is the two-part webinar. Part two will be after the new year on January 14th. Same time, we'll be going into, talking through running an optimal interview and hiring process once you have candidates and professionals in the process with at your respective companies. So want to kick it over to Rachel to talk a little bit about some of those key areas of focus today.
Yeah, just going over some of the topics that we're going to cover today. The first one will be retirements and just how to plan for the future staffing needs that you're going to have. We're going to go into um, how to get your pipeline, your workforce to match your workload and what's coming up next for 2026, 2027, your backlog, and how to reach more candidates, some strategies, some creative ways to get that pipeline built, and understanding what other contractors in the market are trying, what's working, what's not working. And then we have a couple just of our own real life success stories that have worked for us, thought that it would be helpful to share. And then we'll go for some takeaways and insights and hopefully look to you guys for a few questions.
Thanks, Rachel. Appreciate that. So obviously there's a lot going on in this slide in terms of data and numbers. So we wanted to kind of set the table for where we are as an industry, kind of the reason why, how did we get here? And obviously ABC West Michigan is a great resource. They provided some great industry data for the US construction industry. As you can see, the first part here, you see some big numbers. And really, what does that mean? We obviously have a supply and demand problem or issue in this industry. So over the next 2 years alone, between 2025 and 2026, we're going to need close to 1 million new workers here in this country to keep up with existing demand in the industry. So we're talking about maintenance, not growth. And then at the same time, roughly 9 out of 10 contractors say they're struggling in some way, shape, or form with finding talent. So wanted to talk a little bit about the impact that the labor shortage will have overall. And so it will cost the industry, just short of 11 billion annually. Where is that felt? Project delays due to these staffing deficits could be anywhere between 3 to 8 months, and maybe that varies in your respective niche, your respective company. So The other issue that we're running into is obviously the demographics, the workforce itself. I'm 43 years old, and I'm now the average age of a construction team member in the industry. And we know that over one out of every five people in the industry are at or above 55. So there will be a transition. And we've all seen that stat probably by this point that 41% of the construction workforce today will retire by 2031. So with this deficit, what does it really mean? Well, realistically, the companies that have the ability to attract and retain top talent will win work. They'll be more successful. The ones that struggle with that are going to have more issues, are going to feel it in their backlog. They're going to feel it with their margins and client relationships overall and maintaining that backlog. And so this is where everyone together collectively as an industry can take a proactive approach to recruiting, and companies can get ahead of this so they can be competitive not only today, but over the next 5 years and moving forward in the industry. And I want to kick it over to Jason, can talk about how do you prepare for the next step with retirement.
Yeah, and Adam, that 41% of folks that are retiring in 2031, we've seen in talking with contractors really across the region. That's the one stat that everybody keeps bringing up. So what do you do now? And to your point about proactive versus reactive, that's what we're seeing the different approaches in the market. The more proactive companies they're starting to see here, they're going to pinpoint those critical roles, whether it's your directors and executives or your superintendents and your project managers and pre-con folks. And you're going to have to ask that simple but uncomfortable question. If this person retires in the next 2 to 5 years, who's ready to step in? Sometimes you'll have an internal succession plan ready to go. Other times you might be thinking about, hey, we got somebody retiring in 2028. Let's start putting some feelers out now or developing some relationships and really figuring out like who's the best person to transition into this role. Companies that are going to wait, to Adam's point, the reactive folks out there, they're going to, when you're in that position to hire, it's going to be who's the best person available, not who's the best person out there in the market. So the other piece we see is the mentorship program. So as senior leaders begin to exit, the tribal knowledge they carry, how jobs really run, how clients really think, how very nuanced problems get solved, that's incredibly valuable, but it doesn't transfer on its own. Companies that do this well put in structure and accountability around knowledge transfer, so it becomes intentional and not just assumed. For example, one client we've been working with historically, they had a general superintendent overseeing their field. They've grown tremendously the last several years, and what they figured out that they kind of outgrew that model and needed to insert a layer of several, three or four different general superintendents, each overseeing project teams and individual supers. So those general superintendents now function more as mentors and coaches, not just firefighters. So twice a year, they're meeting formally with their direct reports, talking about career progression, skill gaps, milestones, and development. They're also getting involved in talent and hiring. So the VP of Field Operations, eventually, you'll be able to focus some of that time elsewhere. So what we're seeing from that is faster readiness, more engaged team members, better questions, clear expectations, stronger bonus alignments, and earlier promotions. And the last piece here is investing in the right training to help develop some of those skills. So we're seeing companies, they might bring in outside consultants for leadership development, organizational design. They might lean on like an EOS type framework. And others are making these more internal hires that we didn't see 5 or 10 years ago, like a chief people officer, directors of talent, or organizational development or training and development managers. So these are no longer like nice to have seats. They're becoming real, very important leadership functions that are mission critical in order for continuity and scale. And Adam, if you want to go to the next slide there. So the same proactive mindset applies when we talk about matching workforce needs to your project backlog. And superintendents are a great example for this. So a lot of positions, people make changes, maybe in January, February, after you've gotten your bonus, you're in review. Superintendents is a little more, those roles are a little more unique where most people we find are going to change jobs when projects end. So a project might end on Christmas or New Year's Day. Schedules don't always care about holidays when it comes to what's going on in the field. So we tell our clients is if you want the top talent, it's about dedicating that right pipeline development, knowing when projects end. If you're going to staff a project in March, but the guy you want, if he has a product starting, then you might have to bring him aboard in January, and that conversation might have to start happening in October or September. So again, we're advising companies out there, track project completion dates relative to the projects you have going on. Make sure you leave yourself enough time to hire those right people. Again, what happens is if you're not proactive, you're just going to take what comes in the door, and the delta between that A superintendent candidate and the B minus or C plus individual you might have to hire can be hundreds of thousands of dollars, if not millions, for that specific hire. So if you want to go to the next slide. So again, develop an ongoing touch plan relative to when your projects start, making sure that, hey, whether it's having that candidate go see a project site, go meet with someone for a coffee or a lunch, making sure there's regular contact with those folks you've identified as potential future leaders in your company, and make sure that you're following through on that plan. Yeah, back to you, Adam.
Thanks, Jason. Appreciate it. Want to talk about some ways to potentially expand the candidate pool when you have certain needs. And, first and foremost, everyone has kind of an order of operations. And of course, this is that time of the year where many of you inside your company, you may have already completed your talent plan for 2026, or you're putting a bow on it now over the next week or two, thinking about what are those positions of need? What do I need out of these seats now and moving forward? And traditionally, what is the first step? Obviously, you're going to put a job posting up for a superintendent, project manager, put feelers out from your team, see if they know anybody, and look inside your specific niche within construction. And that's typically the traditional methods. And if you find some great talent, fantastic. If not, what's next is the question. So if those needs are exhausted, and we talked about the talent shortage and how do you find and add in new talent inside of this industry and inside your company as well. And what we've seen is actually firsthand, and we're going to share some case studies of some contractors that have successfully implemented these. We call them non-traditional hiring methods, where they're looking at, and obviously if anybody here has some best practices they can share, we would love to hear that, but focusing more on skill-based and soft skills rather than having the specific experience within your construction specialty or niche. So there's two different buckets there. And one of them would be outside of your niche in construction. So for example, if you're a mechanical contractor, maybe looking at other specialties in and around construction in order to find people. And then ultimately as well, maybe there are people in other industries outside of construction, but they possess those soft skills that are transferable inside of construction, inside your company, and inside certain positions. And that can create a whole new pool. So wanted to list a few steps that companies can take, your ABC members can take moving forward. And the first one is identifying the skill requirements. And of course, if you have a position, a project manager, an estimator, superintendent, of course, one of those prerequisites is what are the skills and behaviors and traits that I need out of this person? Obviously, they've got to align on the core values, but they have to have the skills necessary to do the job and have the behaviors and act in a certain way to be successful. But one thing to consider here, if you're thinking, hey, for this position within my company, do I hire within my niche, or should I consider looking in construction outside of my niche or in another industry, is when do I need this seat filled and why? What's driving that? Do I need somebody in the next month, 2 months, 3 months, because that's the demand of the job of this role? If so, you may not have the luxury to look outside of your niche or outside the industry in non-traditional methods. Now, if you do have the time and there is this kind of approach of building a pipeline and ongoing recruiting efforts to find the right person when you find them, knowing that the demand will be there with the backlog of work, and assuming that your team has the ability to invest the time and resources necessary for training, coaching, and mentoring, then you can potentially consider using those non-traditional methods. And so we've listed here in the second point, automotive and manufacturing being two areas where we've unfortunately seen some ebbs and flows and some challenges. And there may be great professionals that are with companies focusing on these verticals, automotive and manufacturing, that we've even seen, unfortunately, some larger companies go through some layoffs based on being reliant on these industries that are not delivering right now. There can be some great talent to focus in these specific specialties that can help you, in your business today and in your company today. The residential space, we know that's a slippery slope, of course, for commercial contractors. But obviously, again, going back to the soft skills, transferable skills, if these folks have the right core value fit, they have the right skill set match, that could be another avenue to look at as well. And then taking it beyond that, as far as some of those industries outside of construction where we've seen success, you can see it on here: logistics, manufacturing, warehousing. What do you see out of the soft skills for people in those roles? You see them emphasizing safety, scheduling, structure, flexibility, the ability to manage moving parts, projects, multiple customers. That can be very, very, very effective for somebody inside the industry. Automotive and mechanics, that's speaking a little bit more to aptitude and personality. So somebody that's got that technical acumen, being very detail oriented, that can fit very nicely in certain technical roles within the construction industry. And of course, technology kind of goes without saying. Of course, everybody understands AI, where it's at, but even in construction, we're seeing operating drones, AI-driven software and technology, advanced machinery. If talented people are leaning into technology, that can be very valuable inside of a construction company. And lastly, hospitality and other service-based industries. I think we all can speak to going to our favorite restaurants, hotel, retail stores where you have contact with that customer service person that's gone out of their way to create an excellent experience that would prompt you to return. And if you think about this inside of the construction space, what are you looking to do is to create a great client experience for your partners, for clients, anybody in your sphere of influence. And those people inside of those industries can be very, very strong brand ambassadors for your business out in the community. So just something to keep in mind as you're looking for people potentially expanding that candidate pool. Wanted to turn it over here to Jason to cover. We want to cover a few case studies here that speak to contractors trying some different methods, getting creative with finding new talent and being successful in doing so.
Yeah, this was a real interesting one. So we had a client, they're $25 million. You can go to the next slide, Adam. So they're a self-performed general contractor. On certain jobs, they'll act as a specialty contractor as well. So the challenge, they needed an estimator, not just any estimator, someone that can handle the volume, pace, and complexity of work in both, functioning both as a GC and a specialty. The traditional pool we were looking at, so if you're looking at general contracting estimators doing the same type of work for what the contractor was looking for, those folks were commanding a salary about $150,000 or more, which was above the compensation bands for this particular company. So early on, we had a very honest conversation with the client. Are we going to limit ourselves to a very narrow pool, or are there certain disciplines within construction that make sense to go in based on the type of projects that they do, the volume that they'll handle, the customers, the working environment, those types of things. We were also looking for somebody that was a good core values fit, that was looking for this kind of environment. And we looked at the concrete space, the mechanical space, the commercial roofing space, ultimately found a really talented individual out of commercial roofing. And even though that at first glance might not seem like a natural transition, this individual had spent time both as a general contractor on certain jobs and working as a specialty on others, used to that pace. They actually had shared some common general contracting clients. But what this individual, the candidate, was really looking for was defined growth, someone who could really mentor them and give them some direction. And the president of the company really stepped in and put together a very detailed 1-year plan, kind of hitting certain milestones in terms of what the integration, the expectations were, also tying that to bonus. So that this individual came in just over $100,000, but with bonuses was able to make a substantial impact on the company and be compensated as such. We're now a couple of years later. This person's helped to double the revenue of the company. His W-2 was well over 200 grand this year, so he's making more than twice when he started, just a great fit. And he's gone from somebody that needed some time to integrate and learn this side of the business to now being a leader in that company. So just a great win-win there.
Yeah, in this case, this client is a top interiors contractor and they're looking for a project manager. And this is a very limited local talent market. The traditional interiors candidates were a tough option because the pool in the area is already small and they were already one of the top players themselves. So this prompted us to expand into the GC talent pool. And the big challenge there was that there's this perception among GC candidates that moving to a specialty contractor could be a step backward for them rather than a lateral or a growth move. So we knew we were going to find someone who wanted that transition from a large structured environment to someone where they have like an individual impact and where their impact was more clearly felt. So we identified a strong project manager at a large GC and they were open to a conversation. So we really had to frame out their career path and not just what their job responsibilities would be. So this looked like instead of being one of many at a large GC, they would become a key contributor and more of a big fish in a small pond. They would have an opportunity to have a seat at the table, visibility with executive leadership, and they would have access to top tier projects. I mean, this contractor was doing all the biggest major projects in the area. So at the company that they were at, the GC, they wouldn't just be handed projects based on internal politics or however they're dispersed. Client involvement was really key in this one. They identified early in the process who was going to champion this and be able to close this candidate. In this particular candidate, they saw something in him. He was really tech savvy. They had this green screen technology that they were rolling out with their projects. So this was a big part of the sell that he would have the opportunity to run that. He would be their go-to guy. He would use the technology on these high profile projects. So in this case, that person that they identified was the president also. And he just really had to communicate the culture, the vision, and the candidate's long-term growth. So this was a success story because he accepted the role, transitioned, and he integrated into the team, the culture. He joined their golf league, really bought into all that, and was on these high-profile jobs in the market that were exciting to him, and he's still a part of them.
Thanks, Rachel. One thing also just wanted to point out, had one more case study to share, but one thing we love about we're obviously ABC members and everyone here is an ABC member. It's such a close-knit community here in West Michigan when it comes to contractors. There's so many great companies doing great things in different specialties. And clearly, even friendly competitors, right? It's not adversarial, which is how it should be in a community inside the industry. And in many cases, when a company has a need, it's very risky, and nobody wants to quote poach from their competition, right? And create this musical chairs in terms of talent. I poach from you, you poach from me, and really also on the candidate side, there's a lot of risk there too. If they were to leave for a direct competitor, there's a lot of risk there because they don't want to burn bridges either, right? So by trying these different methods, it's a way to really mitigate risk on all sides, where it creates this great scenario where everybody is able to solve a problem, get ahead, but yet they're not upsetting the apple cart and directly burning any bridge, if you will, or that perception. So just wanted to point that out. And we had one more here to share. This is a $30 million specialty contractor, Michigan-based, throughout the Midwest, part of a family of companies. One of their niches is mechanical insulation, which of course is extremely niched. They needed to find an estimator. That pool was very, very small, to say the least, of course. So clearly, the contractor exhausted their efforts pretty quickly, right? They put job postings up, really didn't get anybody that fit that niche, tried to use referrals, didn't have success. So they were open-minded to try something a little different. And they came across somebody a strong estimator candidate from the HVAC service side of the business, which is fairly adjacent. They still understood mechanical. They still understood it as a concept and similar clients. So this wasn't completely, 100% learning curve, right? But there was a little bit there. And what we found was the individual's employer at the time was really trying to kind of push them toward a project management path. And the candidate, the individual, really wanted to pursue more of an estimating path. That was just where their passion lies, where they thought they were really strong, and that's where they wanted to spend the time in their career. And the contractor did an excellent job of painting a picture in terms of the company culture, how they fit in, and also a path to estimating now and moving forward. So, needless to say, it was a good fit all around. But we want to shout out the contractor and also the person, because both sides were willing to put in the time. The company putting in the time in terms of coaching, training, mentorship. They realized they had the time to do it. They were going to invest the resources to get this person up to speed. And the person was open-minded to try something different and take a risk. To do something a little different than what they were doing in the HVAC service side. So it ended up working out very well. And this person was actually onboarded and hired in September of last year. And last report, their performance is exemplary, and they will be actually promoted in the next 2 weeks to being a senior estimator. So good story all around there. So want to open it up at this point to any questions that have come through. But of course, if anybody has any comments to share, and any takeaways, any best practices, any challenges, throw them our way. We'd love to open it up, and we have time set aside for that. Lindsay, do we have any questions coming through?
I don't see any in the chat right now. Let me see. We have a question popping up. Do you have experience with hiring lower level or entry level roles?
Adam, you want to take this? I can take it.
Go ahead, Jason.
Yeah, so yes, we do. It's interesting. Starting in the space 15 years ago, you probably see more companies doing entry level and maybe hiring project engineers or APMs themselves. Over the last 5 years, as it's gotten more challenging. Yeah, we've been tasked with finding anything from entry level to your 1 or 2 year project engineers to 3 or 4 year, 3 to 5 year assistant project managers, assistant superintendent type. So we've worked at all levels, and you get a different challenge with that younger workforce. They're a little bit nervous sometimes to talk about career change, or they're asking different questions. Definitely, yeah, definitely a different challenge, but we've spent plenty of time working in those roles. If there's a specific role you have a question about, yeah, happy to address that as well.
Can I ask a question outright?
Yeah, yeah.
Okay,
Yes.
without typing it is what I
Yeah,
meant.
No, jump in.
Are there certain times of the year that it's easier to catch some of those lower level or entry level candidates? I assume that, a time of year is when people are jumping ship, they got their Christmas bonus. Is January a good time to kind of capture some of those? And then again in May when graduations and things like that come out. And then is there a best practices when you're just kind of doing like a scatter shot type of look for, grab for people? And I'm just talking actually just, the entry level, trying to garner interest and kind of getting some of those guys in.
Jennifer, great question. Do you have specific positions you're referring to?
Yeah,
These
we're
in the
always
office or the
looking for
field?
carpenters, and having people just even interested in the industry itself. Like I saw your slide with, being able to kind of strip away some people maybe from the manufacturing or service industry, food service industry.
Mhm.
Like, everybody should be willing to kind of try different careers in their path if they're not happy with where they end up. So I just am curious, like when is kind of good times to capture those and some of the best tools or websites to do that.
Yeah, great question. And we can share some stuff offline. We're happy to. As far as the time of the year, um, if you're talking in the field or in the office entry level type of roles, what we've seen firsthand is typically, and we got to shout out WMCI for doing such a great job with infusing young talent into the space and providing those resources. But even finding them, what we've seen is a lot of our contractors are just hitting the streets, boots on the ground, high schools, community colleges, vocational schools. Obviously, what we found is, and this was one thing we were going to cover, but it's probably relevant here, is that there was, when I was thinking about going to college, over 20 years ago, there was, of course, a stigma with, you got to get your 4-year degree or, you're going to miss out on a certain amount of earnings. Well, clearly that left a gap for 10 to 15 years that has to get addressed. So, what we're seeing now is, okay, contractors are leaning into their local high schools in the area, trade schools, vocational schools, getting the word out, communicating that via social media. There are some other resources as well that we can share with you, Jennifer, offline, but it's really kind of all hands on deck. And it really is boots on the ground community type of outreach.
Okay, so you're seeing a lot more like personal interaction with students or with, whoever instead of people, blindly going to the newspaper or the website, looking, circling ads, basically. Got it. Thanks so much. Appreciate
You got it. You got it. Great question. Thank you.
Yet I see there's another question in the chat box. They're talking about if you had a few people start that have been no shows that seem like promising candidates in the process. So kind of filtering for work ethic and just someone's how resilient they're going to be. Do they have what it takes to do the job? It's very difficult in a room to, if someone asks you that question, you're going to give the best answer. We found that reference checks are probably the best way for this, for this specific issue, very thorough reference checks. And people always say, well, if someone gives a reference, they're always going to be they'll give a glowing review. If you ask them 3 or 4 softball questions, yes, you'll probably get, a very nice response. But if you ask more nuanced questions, what we find is people are probably going to be honest with you. So if you ask specific questions that are related to this, how they handled, if they had, if their plates were full, how did they respond, right? Even though how did they do month 2 or 3, even though month 1 might have been good? Just kind of trying to create some of those more situational questions with references is probably the best way to filter for this. But it's something that's a very tough filter. So that's what we found is the best way to combat it, but it's still a challenge.
I would,
One,
oh,
go ahead,
I
Rachel.
I was just going to say on that one as well, we worked with a restoration contractor, and that's a lot of hours, a lot of work, a lot of labor. And something that they did that was really successful was putting 90-day reviews in the offers so that, they know someone would show up for those 90 days at least. And it takes a while to get acclimated, like those first 3 months. It really takes time to understand and learn what the hours will be like or understand the culture in the company. So, saying that this is a for instance, but you come in at 60,000, but after your 90-day review, we'll bump you up to 65 or something like that as a suggestion. Sorry, Adam, go ahead.
No, that was it. No, thank you.
Great. I have one more question here. What factors do candidates value beyond just standard compensation and standard benefits packages?
Yeah. Well, obviously it's going to be a little bit different for everyone. We actually we've we've um, we've actually been tracking this since we've started in the industry, and we obviously there's a tool that we're willing to share, of course, afterwards, along with the slides, of course. But it's going to be a little bit different for everybody. But we have a series of factors that we see, and when it's all said and done, It's going to be culture. It's going to be opportunity for growth, the type of work they're doing, um, geography. Those are going to be some of the key factors. Um, and we've actually seen geography, believe it or not, be since COVID has been a much higher weighted factor. So what we'll typically do is if we're working with professionals in terms of them considering another company, a client partner of ours or contractor, is we'll actually go through and have them run a pros and cons analysis with their current company and a company they're considering now and 3 to 5 years from now. And so we're going to actually hold them accountable, and they may bring in a spouse to do this, where they're just going to evaluate the opportunities and objectively decide what's most important to them. So we do have a series of set factors. Obviously, it's the each individual is going to stack rank what's most important, but ideally, compensation. What we're trying to shoot for is that compensation and benefits is not going to be number one. We know it's going to be one of the top 3 to 4 factors, but it's going to be a little bit more of a formality. Obviously, if something's changed inside of an organization, if the culture's changed, if there's been dramatic growth, monitoring that, everyone's going to value a different type of structure.
Yeah.
And in terms of career path as well, we did allude to, and Jason can jump in here in a second, going back to that case study, that last case study, that company, the company this person was with, we're just trying to kind of push them to a project management path, and they wanted an estimating path. So clearly, there was just a disconnect there between where this person wanted to be and what the company was, the path they had laid out for them. Jason, did you have something to add there?
Yeah, I'd say the other big shift over the last 5, 10 years is what candidates are looking for is organizational transparency. So companies, for example, that run on EOS, where all your numbers, your margins, your goals, everything's visible to a leadership team. Everyone knows what's going on. Everybody's on the same page. You have a forum to ask questions and troubleshoot issues. You're kind of older school contractors where that's close to the vest. A lot of team members, like you're talking to a project manager, superintendent, they might have no idea what last year's revenue numbers were or what next year's backlog looks like. So the more transparency you get from companies, I feel like candidates are running towards that a bit more than what we've seen in the past. They're asking different questions, and companies that are more open faced, the candidates we discussed, we're seeing that alignment. The case studies that Adam, Rachel, and I shared, all three of those companies are very much open books. So as you go through the process, candidates see that. When they ask a specific question, they're getting a very clear answer. And a lot of times you hear, boy, I've been at my company for 8 years and I don't know anything. Like if I asked my boss this question, I wouldn't get anything. It wouldn't get anything substantive back. So I think organizational transparency is a huge one.
Hope we addressed that. Anything else coming through?
I'm not seeing anything else popping up in the chat here. Let's see. I think if we don't see any more coming through the chat here, I've got one or two more that I'd like to ask here on our end.
Yeah.
Sure.
Yeah, so
Fire away.
what's the average fill time, Adam, for searches in West Michigan?
Oh, great question. Well, I think we got to probably identify the position. So if we're talking, key roles, for example, superintendents. I know we talked about that a little bit earlier. Jason alluded to that for superintendents. If companies are tracking the completion date of projects for certain people in the industry, a lot of that will be depending on when they're finishing a project. So a perfect example, if there's a amazing project here in Grand Rapids, in the Grand Rapids area, somebody does not want to leave a project early. They would burn a huge bridge, and obviously no one's going to want to add someone to their team that isn't willing to respect that, right? Because it's a two-way street. So a lot of that's going to be dependent on projects being completed. As far as estimators go, that one obviously that's probably one of the more tougher roles to fill overall. So we're really recommending companies always be on the lookout for a role like that, assuming that they're going to have a backlog and the demand's going to be there, because that could take anywhere between 3 to 6 months to 12 to 24 months on the long end, just because from an estimating side, there's a little different wiring there. Obviously, maybe more risk averse. Somebody may not be as open to consider a change. Did you have any other positions in mind, Lindsay, specifically, or just overall?
Just overall.
Yeah, project
And some of that
managers
might be
probably.
when, sorry, go ahead.
No, I was just going to say project managers maybe a little bit of a shorter fill time, realistically, if you're looking at positions. So go ahead, Jason.
And some of it's when the time of the year you start the search might make an impact too. To Adam's point, superintendents, it doesn't matter. It's kind of it's always going to be a revolving door of project completion dates. Those
Yeah.
fill times might be anywhere. If you're super ambitious, you get somebody in for 1 or 2 interviews quickly and get a resignation, maybe 30 to 60 days on the that's on the quick side. If you start a estimator search in November, chances are that risk averse candidate pool, they don't even talk to you until their bonuses drop and they've had their year-end reviews in December or January. The more specialized, the longer, generally speaking, the longer it takes. And also as you get more on the estimating engineering side, those are more risk averse versus your superintendents who are, hey, when do I start? So
And one thing to add, I think Jennifer had a great question on the timing piece of it too, that I wanted to bring back because yes, obviously this time of the year, a lot of people are going through their reviews and they're probably not making a move until they find out their career path with their company, compensation, benefits. That being said, if those reviews are unfavorable and they don't go well, it doesn't hurt to plant a seed prior to in order to make sure that, if that doesn't work out and it's not the path they want, you can bring them in and they may move forward. So there really isn't a bad time, I guess, to recruit. Hopefully we answered that, Lindsay.
Yeah. And then I had one more question sent over. Which roles tend to be most successful when filled through adjacent hiring?
It's a good question. Anybody can jump in there. I would say I hit this a little bit earlier, but really understanding the position and how much time is needed to fill, when do you need this person in the seat? So in some cases, if you need somebody in immediately to plug and play and contribute, that may be where you may have to stick with somebody within your niche in construction, just because you may not have the luxury of taking the time to train them, onboarding, put the resources in. But if it's a role where you're willing to put the time in, you don't need anyone yesterday. You can be a little bit more selective, and you have the luxury of spending the time training resources from the team to get this person up to speed, even if it's going to take a little bit longer. Rachel or Jason, if you had anything to
yeah,
add to that.
we've obviously moved, estimators, sales and business development folks can come from related spaces. But kind of to Adam's point, what we've seen happen is when someone gets to a certain point in their career, from a compensation standpoint, they're going to be making a lot of money. And what we can't have is when someone moves industries, there's obviously a little bit of a ramp up time. The company's going to put resources into getting them up to speed. If the salaries are too high, that's when you can run into some challenges because if someone's making $150,000 right now in a mechanical world, they're not probably going to make that much, and their value is not going to be there right away in the GC world. So if you're at a certain point of experience, that transition might be more difficult. But for folks that are maybe under like 15 years experience or 10 years experience, that's a really good sweet spot where they have good industry knowledge, but they're not too niche and not too overly compensated where they can't make that kind of career shift.
Yeah, in sales, if you have relevant relationships that transfer over to that contractor, that can play very well. And then also operationally, if people are, and we going back to if you're handling budgets and contracts, if you're handling customers, some of those key things that are needed out of roles like project managers, those could be very relevant and transferable as well.
Right. I have another one that came through in the chat. They come from a corporate background due to the construction industry. What advice could you give or things that they could keep top of mind when working with hiring managers on recruiting for a team?
I want to make sure I understand that one. That's a very good question.
Good
So,
question, yeah.
Lindsay, do you mind repeating that?
Yep.
Okay.
This individual, they come from a corporate background and are new to the construction industry. So looking for advice or things that they should keep top of mind when working with hiring managers on recruiting for a team.
I would say asking good questions of what's worked, but just importantly, what hasn't worked before. So just asking questions and listening is probably the best. I mean, that hiring team you're going to work with is going to have a lot of tribal knowledge and have gone through this. So just trying to use their experience and glean as much as you can, try to use that to, make things better for tomorrow. Um, Adam, Rachel, anything else on that one?
Jason, I love what you said. Just seeking as many mentors as you can. Seeking mentors, the ones that have been there and done that.
And I think too, like myself coming from a different professional background before getting into recruiting, before getting into construction, getting a feel for the different types of personalities you see with different positions. So interacting with the superintendent is much different than interacting with an estimator. That interview, the questions you ask, the jokes that are made might be totally different. So I think it's really just about being comfortable. How do you get quickly comfortable in those different settings? So if it's me, what I did when I was getting into that role is I tried to sit down in as many different interviews, different positions as possible, just to kind of soak that in, to start getting a flavor of how it is to deal with, maybe a more rough and tumble experienced superintendent versus a super, tech savvy younger engineer, estimator with more of an engineering bend.
I don't know if I'm answering the question right, but talking to candidates was really helpful to me in learning the construction industry. I was really honest and said, I'm new to this.
Yeah.
Tell me what you do, what your role is. And they're always more than willing to talk to you. And that also creates good relationships or a good pipeline of people that you can go back to and say, hey, I have a question on this, or do you know somebody in this kind of world too?
Well, I don't see anything else coming through. Um, so if we want to give everyone a few minutes back in their day,
Yeah.
Adam, do you have the information? Did you already share that about the next webinar? If folks haven't registered for that one yet, coming up in about a month or so.
Yeah, we'll go back to the beginning here. It'll be Wednesday, January 14th, 2020, 2026. We can say that now. We'll be in the new year by that point. So
And then
it'll
we
be
will
the same time.
And then we will also, for those of you on the call that are in the HR peer group, Katie will post the recording and the slides so you guys can all have access to that. And then we will email it out too, so you can have all the information from today's call.
And if anybody has any questions beyond this, do not hesitate to reach out to Jason, Rachel, or myself. Happy to address any questions that we didn't cover today. Thank you, everybody, for joining today. Thank you, Lindsay. Really appreciate that. And ABC West Michigan. Hope everybody has a safe, relaxing, and a wonderful holiday season. And look forward to seeing everybody in 2026.
Thank you.
Thanks, Adam.
Thanks, guys.
Thank you. Take care.